We all carry a lot more digital ID now than we did 20 years ago, and I think that psychologically it plays a different part. So my instinct is it can play an important part.
Show us your papers! Why are you doing a Nazi accent? Oh, sorry. Show us your papers. This is Britain. Yep, that's right. Digital ID is coming to the UK. Hello there, you awakening wonders. You know that the UK is on the precipice of becoming an island penitentiary. Many say that's because Keir Starmer has peculiar dreams, affiliations. Who knows what peculiar god he serves? Nevertheless, we better get ready for digital ID. Sometimes they tell us we need digital ID because of viruses. Sometimes they need to tell us we need digital ID to get, tax breaks. Now they're using the idea of migration to tell us we need digital ID. They'll tell you anything they need to tell you in order to fulfill a particular agenda. It's almost like this. We need to assert control over people. Well, what if there was a terrible virus? Okay, that'll work. We need people to stop listening to this individual and this individual. Well, what if those individuals were criminals? Yeah, that would work. That's how the system works. It determines its objective is control, and then it undertakes whatever measures are required. Often that will mean the induction of crisis to legitimise authority. Let me know in the comments and chat if you've noticed that. Let's see what they'll do to justify digital ID.
On identity cards, what does your heart tell you about their potential value?
Well, firstly, I don't know where I put my heart. I put it down somewhere quite recently while I was doing one of my AIDS tests, and I don't know where I bloody well parked it.
Because there was a massive debate, wasn't there, a couple of decades ago?
Yeah, I remember that. I was watching it.
When Labour were last in government, it's very controversial, perhaps still is to some. Does your heart tell you they could play a role, particularly in reducing those pull factors?
Yes, it does.
Yes, that's what my heart's telling me now, that you could have a digital ID card, because that's what I've seemed to have been informed by me overlords.
And that is my instinct. I also think that the debate's moved on in the last 20 years.
Look at this other geezer over here from the BBC, genuflecting and gesticulating like a lunatic, touching away on his own nose and mouth all frantically like he got some sort of allergy to Keir Starmer, which would be a perfectly plausible response. And look at the manner in which the BBC and the government cooperate to convey a piece of information to you as if it's an acceptable piece of information that you shouldn't even consider. You should just down like a sloppy, soggy cornflake of a morning there, saturated in propaganda at the bottom of the bowl, drinking it down, almost delicious to fall into soporific slumber watching the news. But I urge you, awaken. Don't gaze listlessly at these pixels, but focus on their faces and recognize that these are not people that you can trust. This is not a message that you can trust. I know now from long experience. I've been granted the gold and I've been granted the iron, and I see now we cannot trust these individuals and we must make new alliances in order to oppose them.
We all carry a lot more digital ID now than we did 20 years ago, and I think that psychologically it plays a different part. So my instinct is it can play an important part.
Basically just said you've been groomed into it, you've gotten used to it now, and now we all carry phones about, and obviously if people mandated carrying phones, you'd throw your phone right down the toilet, wouldn't you? But given you're charged the grand from or whatever, we're all willing to continually update them and plug them in so they can spy on us more efficiently and let their batteries atrophy, so we have to buy a new one, and ignore the fact that you've got this magnificent piece of technology that should last for years, perhaps even a lifetime, going obsolescent every 6 to 8 months in order to keep you on a conveyor belt of absolute idiocy. Well, this is the time to awaken. Do not submit to any authority other than the authority of God, and you'll be able to detect that in your own heart and spirit. You'll feel it talking to you continually when you surrender to it, when you accept and embrace it, when you repent and turn towards that light. You will know that God is real, that God is the only thing that's real, and that's why people continually emulate the hierarchies, structures and geometry of the Lord, placing themselves in prominent pinnacle positions of power. But these are false idols indeed. Anyone can see that. Look at them. Just look at them.
Obviously, we need to look through some of the detail, but I think that 20 years or so on, a couple of decades on, people are looking differently about the idea of digital then cards, probably more digital ID now.
Yeah, I mean, why not just pop it under your skin? Why not put it under your foreskin or into your labia?
Don't try to normalise digital ID, but the government can rely on the legacy media to normalise their agenda. Here are the legacy media falling over digital ID. Now, remember, Britain is not in a position to start mandating ideas years, or conscripting armies, or normalising new technology that's plainly about surveillance and control. This is a fractured nation on the brink of mass social unrest. You wouldn't know it, though, to look at the media gleefully declaring that we should all just be getting excited about chips under our skin.
Not that skin, that'd be disgusting. You get what's name on it.
The main argument that people historically had against identity cards was that somehow it would allow the state to, track us, follow us, control us in all sorts of potentially pernicious ways.
Yeah, pretty good argument. Pretty good argument, given that we discovered that the state have been spying on us because of the revelations of Edward Snowden, because we know that MI5 were involved, just to take one example, in bringing down Jeremy Corbyn. We know that Julian Assange was jailed for making public information that revealed war crimes that our country were involved in, and that democracy under scrutiny becomes little more than a facade, that during the COVID pandemic we were lied to and manipulated, that we're being lied to continually by media organisations like this one. So how is this guy going to turn this sentence around into, but now is the time where we should all just embrace digital ID? Is he going to say because we've got phones now?
Well, we've given Apple and Google and, or Alphabet as they're now called, and Meta, ludicrous amounts of ability to gather information about us and know about us. And, and yet we're sort of chilled about it. So
that is not good reasoning. Just because you've sat next to Jeffrey Dahmer at the cinema, that don't mean you should let Ted Bundy babysit. Apple are bad. Google are bad. The government are also bad. Don't trust them. In fact, it's bad. I'm being ridiculous and reductive and somewhat comedic. Obviously, Apple and Google are scraping information, but Apple and Google are not in the final analysis separate from your government. They have massive trillion-dollar government or billion-dollar governmental contracts in your country, significant contracts in mine. And indeed, where do you think Google got that technology for Google Maps from? Think about it. Satellites up in space, mapped out all the terrain. It's the CIA, isn't it? So actually, as you know from your experience of observing, there's a revolving door between institutions of mass power. In the final analysis, Google, Alphabet, Facebook, the government, they all intersect. They have shared relationships, shared parties, shared interests. They're not ultimately separate at all. Once in a while, there'll be some interface of tension because Apple won't get some contract they wanted, or Google won't get some tax break that they required. But when it comes to the crunch, baby, and let me tell you, the crunch is here. This is one great Leviathan and a very big club, as your great George Carlin said, and you ain't in it.
Do I think that broadly an equivalent sort of, essentially bit of identity that happens to have the state's branding on it?
What is the state? What is the state's branding? What is this entity that demands our taxes and our fealty? Do you like them? Did you vote for them? Do you trust them? The answer is no, isn't it? So why are we complying anymore? Why would we even contemplate cooperating with any measure that gave them further authority? Let me know in the comments and chat.
Would attract quite the same essentially concerns about civil liberties.
Concerns about civil liberties, as if it's like, concerns about civil liberties. Mate, we're living on the very precipice of totalitarianism. We're tipping into total tyranny and absolute authoritarianism. We're acting like, we've already all got phones. Google's up our arse. Who cares? The world has become increasingly divided, politically, socially, and economically. But many of these divisions stem from a deeper misunderstanding of how money, markets, and policy actually work. Wouldn't it be nice if there was an investment app that was designed by people who understand a macro perspective and how global events affect your finances? And now you can have that power in the palm of your dick. Hand. That's hand, isn't it? Is that how could I get confused? With the Alio Capital app powered by Altitude AI, which identifies shifts in inflation, interest rates, and global risk, then adapts portfolios in real time. Alio is designed for hands-on or hands-off investors. Macro investing for people who want to understand the big picture. Investing is confusing. Get the Alio app to make it all simple. Go to the App Store or Google Play, or text my name Russell to 511 511. Investing involves risks, including the potential of loss of principal. Past performance does not guarantee your results. See terms and conditions. Tax fees may apply. This is a paid advertisement for Alio Capital, baby. In case you thought it was me reading Shakespeare, that was an ad.
As was the case 15, 20 years ago. No, I don't think that. There would have to be significant checks and balances.
Who's doing the checks? Who's doing the balances? Don't trust any of these people, ever.
In respect of how the state used that.
What about this? That technology could be decentralized and used to create localized democracy. We could live in a completely different reality where we are in control of our food resources, our democracy, where we have communities that are democratic and participatory, where we put aside the idea of continual technological advancement as the only goal that we might have and live here in the present, in harmony with nature and one another, establishing some kind of global truce and peace, ending the cultural war by granting people territorial and geographical independence wherever possible, allowing certain regions to be run according to their preferences and customs, or at least according to democracy. For example, my perspective on migration and mass migration is irrelevant. If there were a referenda, it's pretty clear which way the British public would vote on that subject right now. So that's the end of that if you agree with democracy. Why don't you break democracy down to its smallest possible reasonable units? And why don't we emulate the way that we lived for millennia, maybe much longer than that, in relative harmony? We are not trying to achieve utopia. Who wants to achieve utopia? It's a ridiculous and ugly word when you consider it. But why are we clinging to centralized motifs of old power when they don't work and are no longer necessary? If you were starting from zero now, would you say, hey, why don't we have a representative from each of the communities go to Westminster or Washington, D.C., have them extremely susceptible to lobbying and various forms of manipulation, have them have affiliations through culture and class and education with sets of people that are in the corporate and commercial world so that we're alienated from them and them from us? That's the system of government that I want. When what's available now, indeed through the technology that they're glibly discussing, is we could be organising our community and allocating our budgets together. That's possible. They say wisdom is acting on knowledge. Once we know something, we have an obligation to be wise about it.
Information. But I think if you could make the case broadly that it would not only help to, as I say, reduce the black market in labour that suppresses wages, is a pull factor for asylum seekers who are, essentially just economic migrants. It would obviously be part of, have to be part of all sorts of other improvements in services like health services, because you would probably link this kind of identity card to the NHS app, which could pull together all sorts of useful health information
that we could sell to insurance companies and pharmacological companies who we're already giving great big deals to, like Moderna, who got a £10 million vaccine deal just after the pandemic. Remember that Rishi Sunak, who was Chancellor and then Prime Minister, invested in the organisation that funded Moderna when it only had 5 employees and has probably made considerable money from that investment. I imagine. I don't know, because you're not allowed to ask.
That would help us, have speedier access. So and this is stuff, to be clear, that I know the government is working on at a rate of knots.
Wow. They're furiously trying to introduce digital ID because they require authority, because if it were left to consent and compliance, they wouldn't get anything.
And, they will announce all of this when they feel that they've got a package and a product, to put it in simple terms, that is so obviously in most people's sort of quality of life interest.
Two quick questions then.
But it will be controversial.
Yeah.
Lots of civil liberties campaigners will worry about it, and lots of MPs will worry about it. So, I'm not arguing that in the end there won't be a massive furore about it and the government will necessarily get it through. But I think that the conditions for getting it through are better than they've ever been.
Okay, 2 quick questions on that I think people will have. Number one, is your hunch that we might see this before the election?
Yeah, we're
definitely talking about.
Oh yeah, we're definitely going to see it in the election.
Okay,
yeah, definitely going to see it.
That's the first question.
I suspect we'll see it in the next. I don't know whether we see the full-scale obligatory identity card in the next few months. No, but we will see a pilot within the next few months.
Well, this is from Reclaim the Net. The UK government has revived an idea that's already had one funeral. Digital ID, once buried in a flurry of opposition and civil liberty concerns, is now back on the table. Prime Minister Keir Starmer has reportedly given serious thought to national digital ID, presented as a way to make it look like he's doing something about illegal immigration. Do you see how they think?
What are people concerned about?
Legal immigration.
Right, now what ideas do we want to do?
We want to get everyone digital ID cards so we can control everyone and partner with big insurance firms and sell data and make a load of money.
Right, so all we got to do is take A and put it to B. Put your what's name A in pipe B. Right, kids?
The move comes in the context of ongoing pressure on the government to respond to rising channel crossings and the broader debate around migration enforcement. Ministers are eager to be seen doing something effective. A digital ID system offers the image of precision and modernity. It also raises serious questions about privacy, personal freedom and the limits of state power. Rebecca Vincent from Big Brother Watch issued a direct statement. While Downing Street is scrambling to be seen to be doing something about illegal immigration, we're sleepwalking into a dystopian nightmare where the entire population will be forced through myriad digital checkpoints to go about our daily lives. Right, imagine what they'll do is they'll introduce this digital ID and they're like, it's going to be good migration, it's going to be helpful, convenient, it's going to be convenient and safe. Then there'll be some sort of crisis like a pandemic or a war or whatever. They go, right, unless you've got the digital ID card, you can't access these resources or attend these facilities or whatever it'll be. And then it would never go back to normal. Same as it never quite went back to normal after 9/11, never quite went back to normal after COVID, never quite went back to normal after 2008. They slowly escalate the tensions, legitimize the authority until you don't notice that you're not free anymore. You're not free. You're not able to be who you really are. Indeed, one might even argue that identity politics is an extraordinary pageant around freedom. I want to be something different. This isn't who I am. You better believe it ain't who you are. You were made to love God, and you're being used to serve Satan. Her warning echoes long-standing fears. The proposed system would not just apply to newly arrived migrants or foreign nationals, it would apply to everyone. Routine activities like applying for a job, renting a flat, or registering with a doctor could involve compulsory checks. This vision is built into the logic of national ID systems that have been tried elsewhere and in some cases walked back after public resistance. Vincent made her point clear. Mandatory digital ID will not stop small boat crossings, but it will create a burden on the already law-abiding population to prove our right to be here. It will turn Britain into a papers please society. Tony Blair's original ID card plan fell apart in 2010 after years of resistance. His government spent millions trying to convince the public that the cards would improve national security and reduce fraud. The scheme never gained traction. The fingerprints of that original plan remain on this new proposal. Through his think tank, Blair has continued to advocate for a digital identification regime. He's now in a position to influence Starmer. Conservative MP and Shadow Justice Minister Robert Jenrick questioned the practical use of digital ID cards. His assessment cuts through the surface appeal of new technology. Most employers who are employing individuals illegally are doing so knowingly. Asking them to check ID cards rather than the current checks they're already obliged to do is not going to make a blind bit of difference. Obviously, digital ID cards would have been very helpful during that pandemic that they made up to legitimise authoritarianism and sell products and increase the ability to surveil and censor. The absolute horror of vaccine passports is a reminder of just how readily red lines are crossed. Cooked up in the chaos of a public health crisis, the plan to force everyone to carry a card or QR code proving they've been inoculated against COVID-19 was a gross governmental overreach by politicians high on power. At least those vaccines worked, though, and you didn't get immunity once you'd caught COVID, and at least the other measures they suggested, like lockdowns, were effective, and at least they weren't having parties, and at least there weren't record profits for pharmaceutical companies, and at least we didn't later discover that there are relationships between government officials and pharmaceutical bodies and regulatory agencies, and that they're all working with one another and getting jobs in different... Oh. In a grotesque infringement of civil liberties, they fired health and social care workers who refused to comply. Mercifully, ministers eventually came to their senses and shelved the accreditation scheme, but not before it did real harm. The long-term impact was on public trust. The profound shock of this and other crazy stop-the-spread measures shattered public assumptions about how far a democratic state would ever dare go. Thus ended a long, comfortable era of taking our civil liberties for granted. Since then, there's been little by the way of reassurance that the terrifying way in which the machinery of the state was harnessed to control us all during the pandemic was an aberration. Prime Minister Keir Starmer's Britain is one of armed police swooping on comedians for tweets and childminders locked up for using the wrong words. Against this backdrop, it's hardly surprising that there's a hullabaloo about the prospect of digital identity cards. Surely it would be mad to give this ghastly government any new toys. We law-abiding, decent citizens do not want or need to be tracked or traced ever again. So there you go. The COVID period was an example of how increased authoritarianism does not lead to increased excellence, does it? It just led to further control and, on the whole, greater exploitation and a mass transfer of wealth. health, and the disintegration of many communities, of community trust, annihilation of small businesses, and actually increased suicide, cancer, a whole host of things. And there's this thing called myocarditis in the young that didn't even exist before. I don't know where that came from. This is from Whitney Webb. The plan is to replace government-issued ID with a digital ID, but it's not just a card in your phone. It's fundamentally built upon your immutable biometrics, your fingerprints, the precise structure of your face, the unique pattern of your iris. This biometric data is key. It's the hard link that ties your physical body directly to your digital identity credential. Your very body becomes your password. Total objectification, total annihilation, total disregard for the dignity of your humanity and the divinity of your humanity. The reason this is so critical for them is the financial system. UN and Bank for International Settlement docs overtly state that digital IDs and CBDCs are designed to be integrated. So the currencies and your ID will be integrated. They're just putting the various pieces of the mosaic in place without telling you the bigger picture. The system cannot exist without this biometric digital ID, because for this system to function, they must absolutely know every single participant. Your digital wallet will be tied to your digital ID, which is mapped into your biometrics, total financial, biological linkage. This is the ultimate onboarding mechanism into a system of programmable control, where your access to society and your own money is permissioned and revocable based on your compliance. This is the bedrock of the new global financial system. It's not about convenience, it's about control. They will use convenience, they will use safety, they will use migration, they will use COVID. They will use whatever they need to use to legitimize digital ID. I think by now we know who they is, don't we? They is the system, the institutions that transcend nation. They are the outsourced sovereignty. They are the judicial systems that found themselves in positions of power without ever having to pass through the indignity of the ballot box or the electoral will. This is a point of an awakening for you and for me. This is the opportunity for us to recognize that we are more than blobs of biometric data to be digitally maneuvered by ultimately unelected officials and systems of government that we can't replace or remove even when we want to. The fact is that this very same technology could be used to generate mass freedom. The way that independent media has facilitated communication on an unprecedented scale and has disrupted many of their systems of communication and mass media, this same technology could be used to create real democracy. That's what terrifies them, and that's why they're swimming so quickly in the opposite direction. Absolute tyranny and absolute authoritarianism. We must oppose it. But that's just what I think. Let me know what you think in the comments and chat, and join us on Rumble and Rumble Premium. But more important than that, stay free. Thanks for watching the video. Have a look at this one over here, or join us Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday on Rumble.